But first, anniversaries are a good time to reflect on past events and to think about their lessons for the future. Today is the 10th anniversary of the 2010 election, when a first-term Labor government lost its majority, the worst result for a first-term government in 70 years. Of course, I was there working for the then opposition leader, Tony Abbott, as his Chief of Staff. And while it seemed like a lot longer, I have to say, than a decade since then, given we've had 4 Prime Ministers and a whole lot of strife, if you look closely, you'll see that some things don't change, even as the times and personalities do. After Kevin Rudd dumped his signature policy and emissions trading scheme, even though he'd repeatedly called climate change the greatest moral challenge of our time, the Labor Party dumped him. And despite Rudd once being the most popular PM in Newspoll polling history, and despite Julia Gillard's initial burst of popularity after becoming our first female PM and Abbott's so-called unpopularity, an opposition that stood for something came from behind to win the vote against a government that had dumped its own policies and dumped its own Prime Minister. Gillard suffered a massive swing against her government in primary vote terms of 5.4% and the loss of 11 seats. 4.7 million Australians voted for Labor, but 5.3 million for the coalition. And Labor only survived, didn't they, with the support of 2 turncoat former Nationals, 2 so-called independents who refused to follow the preference of their own country conservative electorates. Abbott had said at the outset of the 2010 election that good politics wasn't about making weak compromises with a bad government. It was about working out what you believed in and then going flat out to persuade voters that it was right for our country. And in that, here's the lesson for today. At the start of this pandemic, Scott Morrison said that there was no Team Red or Team Blue anymore, just Australians working together to beat a deadly virus. And fair enough too. In a national emergency, some of the normal rules must be suspended. And we have to hope that what unites us as a country really is bigger than anything that might divide us. But successful political leaders can never forget that while they must govern for all, they must also stand true to the principles of their party. The challenge for Liberals now more than ever is not to allow this COVID crisis to overwhelm the government's broader agenda so that other really important policy areas fall away, as they often do when the urgent overtakes the important. Dams, water for agriculture, so we really can be the food bowl of our region. Energy, energy, energy. The biggest and best comparative economic advantage that we used to have but have squandered because we've gutlessly allowed climate change to overtake the national interest. And the left-wing dogma in our schools and universities, meaning today's young people get a far inferior education despite all the billions spent that I got decades ago in a small, fairly under-resourced country school. Political parties, well, they've got to stand for something. And leaders have to keep faith with those that have gone before, while of course responding to the issues of their time. Post-pandemic, this will be the challenge that the coalition faces because their usual strength, good fiscal management, has been weakened by the pandemic's cost to the budget. But what about the fight for free speech, the promises on religious freedom, and opening up the economy as quickly as possible to save jobs? These are issues where the coalition must take a stand. Right now, we can see there's a battle underway for the soul of the Australian Labor Party. Now, to his credit, Labor frontbencher Joel Fitzgibbon has taken the risky move to go public in his fight against Labor losing its way. For Fitzgibbon, that once proud party of the blue-collar worker is being slowly picked off by the inner-city progressive left and its climate change and identity obsessions. We've seen this war within the left in Britain and America too. What political parties stand for can't get lost as the job of government gets busy. Because government has to tackle long-term problems as well as short-term ones. And that means cracking on with all the challenges the pandemic has just made more urgent. Water security, energy security, and our manufacturing capacity, none of that's gone away just because the government is caught fighting a virus. Let this anniversary today serve as a reminder to Liberals in government that to win the next election, they've got to do more than just rely on a poor Labor leader and a mind the shop mentality. Drive, change, build, deliver. Enough with the reports, the inquiries, the commissions, expert panels, and talk. After all, the job of a Prime Minister isn't just to referee fights amongst the states, it's to get the tough stuff done. This is where our focus must now be, on the tough and the difficult. Policies that for too long have been in the too hard basket. After all, the whole point of a crisis is to use it wisely for change.